Senator from Nebraska.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise today to join my colleagues in talking about the catastrophe at our southern border. What has happened under this Biden administration, how it was created by Joe Biden. Because of his policies, this self-inflicted wound has been created by Joe Biden and his policies. Let's step back a little bit to see, how did we get here? How did we get to the situation where we have a flood of illegal immigrants coming across our southern border? As my colleague from Wisconsin just described, under the Trump administration, President Trump brought the crossings of illegal immigrants to a 45-year low. Less than 1,000 encounters per day. He did that with the same tools that President Biden has available to him today. But instead of taking the same policies that President Trump used to control that border, President Biden was in a rush to undo those policies. He promised a pathway to citizenship for 11 million illegal immigrants that are in this country. He promised to stop locking people up, quote unquote. He said, quote, "For those who come seeking asylum, we should immediately have the capacity to absorb them and keep them safe until they can be heard," end quote. And he said those who cross the border illegally, quote, "shouldn't be the focus of deportation," end quote. Well, certainly on that last point, President Biden has been accurate. If you look at the September numbers, about 270,000 contacts along our southern border, and only about 10% of those folks were deported. He's certainly living up to his promise. In his first 100 days of office, President Biden issued 94 executive orders on immigration. He stopped the construction of the border wall. He halted deportations, suspended the Remain in Mexico provisions. He repealed Trump's Interior Enforcement Executive Order that prioritized immigration enforcement. President Trump's order encouraged states and local jurisdictions to enforce federal immigration laws. Part of it was reviving the Secure Communities program, which orders the Department of Homeland Security to consider stripping federal funding from so-called sanctuary cities and encourage additional criminal prosecutions for illegal entry into the United States. Under the Biden administration, Joe Biden has abused the process of parole. Now, I want to be clear what we're talking about here when we're talking about parole. We're not talking about parole as in, I have been in prison and now I've done enough of my time and have been good behavior in prison that I can get paroled and released into the public with supervision from our criminal justice system. No, that's not what we're talking about here. Parole is a function that the executive branch can use to be able to allow people to come into this country. Now, the way the law is written, it is supposed to be on a case-by-case basis. That it's only to be used in cases of extreme humanitarian need or in the best interest of our country. And if we look back over the Obama and Trump administration, on average, about 5,600 people were paroled into this country. So these are people that are not United States citizens. These people were paroled into our country in a given year. That would suggest, again, it was being used on a case-by-case basis by the previous two administrations. Under this president, he has absolutely abused parole. This is a lawless administration. President Biden has paroled last year into this country 1.2 million illegal immigrants. 1.2 million. To put that in perspective, that is about 2/3 the population of my home state. 2/3 the population in Nebraska. So again, let's just take a step back and compare that. 1.2 million people in the last year versus an average of 5,600. This is an absolute abuse of executive power, of taking a law that was meant for one purpose, to be on a case-by-case basis, and applying it to whole classes of people to allow people to come in here.